Fiery attacks on military airfields, oil refineries engulfed in flames, a budget deficit that can no longer be concealed. Last night, Ukrainian drones and missiles unleashed real hell on the Russian occupiers in several regions, including temporarily occupied Crimea. While Russian air defense lets strikes through to strategic targets, Kremlin officials are resorting to foul language over a record budget deficit. More on the fiery weekend for Russian logistics and the sell-off of Russia's gold reserves in the report by Daniel Diomin.
The Baltimore military airfield near Voronezh. On the night of May 27th, Ukrainian missiles paid a visit there. According to the local governor, the debris allegedly only damaged a tire repair shop. However, monitoring channels report that the strike hit the location of the 47th Guards Bomber Aviation Regiment. Aircraft from there take off to carry out strikes on Ukraine. After the attack, thick black smoke rose above the airfield. In the Krasnodar region, the city of Tuapse was once again hit by another drone attack. Local authorities reported falling debris and a fire. But according to monitoring channels, one of the powerful explosions occurred right in the area of the local oil refinery. This is already the fifth successful attack on this oil refinery just this spring. The enterprise is part of a single production complex together with the seaport terminal and belongs to the Rosneft Corporation. And this is now Taganrog in the Rostov region. There were explosions on the territory of aviation repair plant number 325. The temporarily occupied Crimea was also hit. In Sevastopol, the local Gauleiter Mikhailo Razvozhayev complained about a massive attack by drones and British Storm Shadow missiles. Missiles pierced the roof of the building of the Southern Directorate of the Russian Central Bank. According to Crimean partisans, the real target was the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet's Air Force, which was located in this building. Donetsk and the occupied part of Zaporizhzhia also experienced the largest drone attack in recent years. The partisan movement also confirmed. Defense forces struck enemy field depots and reserve command posts. Now the occupiers are forced to urgently withdraw the remaining equipment closer to Mariupol, which critically complicates their logistics on the front line. While strategic enterprises are burning, a giant hole is forming in the Russian budget. As of January through April, the federal treasury deficit increased to a record 5.8 trillion rubles. This figure has already exceeded the annual limit by 1.5 times. Because of this critical situation, members of the Russian State Duma are increasingly resorting to obscene language.
Let's take a look at what to do about the federal budget deficit. Last year we had over 5 trillion rubles, and now it's almost another 5, so in total that's already about 11 trillion. What are we going to do about this? Are we going to print money or what?
In order to somehow cover the deficit of nearly $62 billion, the Kremlin has resorted to extreme measures, selling off the gold reserves that it had accumulated for more than 20 years. According to the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service, in just the first quarter of this year, the Russian central bank sold off nearly 22 tons of precious metal. Daniel Diomin details, InterTV channel United News Marathon.
And we will continue our conversation with our studio guest. This is Valentyn Hladkykh, an expert from the Analytical Center United Ukraine. Mr. Valentyn, we just watched the report, and this week, well, we had Mr. Biletsky, yes, the commander of the Third Army Corps, Andriy Biletsky, who stated in an interview with Reuters that the Russian army is exhausted. Let me quote, "The next 6 to 9 months will be a turning point in the war, a window for seizing the initiative, with the next 6 months being the most important." Aren't we falling into the trap of, well, I wouldn't call it complacency, but of these statements and information that might be perceived as, you know, as reassuring, like a warm bath? Well, relatively warm, of course.
Well, you see, you can actually just take a look at it from two different sides right here.
Right. You can always look at it from two sides.
Frankl, yes, that book, there's the Man's Search for Meaning, yes, or The Psychologist in the Concentration Camp. He said that the first to die were those who thought it would end soon. The second to die were those who thought it would never end. The third, the ones who survived, were those who dealt with everyday problems, day by day. So we have to do our own thing, regardless of what's happening in Russia. Our task is to carry out those tasks to solve those problems that bring us closer to victory in this war. And in this context, once again, we see that although oil prices have supposedly risen on the global market, Russian revenues have apparently not increased. And why was Russia unable to take advantage of the change in the market situation? Well, because essentially their oil refineries were taken out. And when the Russians were terrorizing Kiev, well, just this past weekend, yes, the security service of Ukraine destroyed that oil pipeline in the Vladimir region for them. Yes, there in Torina, or whatever that settlement is called. A significant part of, let's say, the fuel network, including in the Moscow region, is supplied from there. There is already news that there is a gasoline shortage in Russia and that they are buying gasoline from Belarus, and in some regions there are even serious difficulties. And in this context, once again, I recall, as has been mentioned repeatedly, that the drone sanctions from the SBU have caused more harm to the Russians than the global sanctions. Why? Well, because as was said on this matter by Mr. Khamara, the head of the SBU now, after this strike, sanctions can be circumvented. And if an oil terminal burns down, then it burns down. If port infrastructure burns down, then it burns down. So obviously these are different areas. Diplomats solve their own tasks. The security service solves its own tasks. The military solves their own tasks. But in the end, we are all moving toward a common result. So what Mr. Beletsky says, well, he's right, because he's actually there on the front line of combat. He sees how effectively and massively the Russians are carrying out their various assault actions there and how their intensity is either increasing or decreasing. An economist analyzes Russia's ability to, conduct mobilization and, roughly speaking, prepare equipment there.
Great mobilization. That is something Putin definitely still has left. He can announce it and apply pressure with sheer numbers.
But again, many people are already saying that this isn't the kind of situation where numbers alone decide the outcome. It's a prepared, organized, armed mass that makes the difference. In that case, definitely yes. But 10 people with shovels are unlikely to take a single fortified bunker with a machine gun.
Nevertheless, we are hearing threats about escalating strikes. We are hearing calls for diplomats to leave Kiev. And how do you personally feel when you hear such news, so to speak, from our neighbors?
Calmly, because they are doing everything they can do. They aren't doing anything now that they haven't been doing for the past 4 years. The only difference is, well, the scale. It also differs, perhaps, in frequency. Although I remember when they used to put on these kinds of every Monday for us.
Yeah.
Similar performances. And I remember when the destruction was, well, no less significant, and the number of casualties was, again, yes, perhaps it's inappropriate to quantify every human life, but nevertheless, we understand that we have endured even more difficult shelling. Well, let's not forget. Just 3 months ago, we were talking about the most difficult winter. We had problems with heating, with energy, with electricity. So, well, who are they trying to scare? So what's the big deal that Oreshnikov supposedly got scared that they're going to destroy yet another garage cooperative? I think they just took Trump's statements seriously about Ukrainian drones being made in garages and decided to hit the garages. Well, I think the number of garages in Ukraine is much greater than the number of hazelnut groves in Russia.
A garage co-op, definitely.
So all of this, let's say, is not a new challenge. You see, everything we're talking about now, it's not a game changer, if I can put it that way. In other words, this isn't some unknown factor that could now play a decisive role. These are all well-known challenges, and the tools to counter or prevent them are also well-known. For example, today's address by Zelensky to the Americans and his visit to Sweden. Well, it's all in the same category. That is, we understand what we need to do to minimize risk and harm.
So, in fact, if you pull back this curtain of statements, yes, this screen of loud, frightening and menacing declarations, then Putin is approaching Trump's political deadline because the midterm elections are on November 3rd with the following result. Ukrainian drones and long-range systems are methodically taking out Russian air defenses.
Yes.
And so this Russian budget, Valentyn Hladkykh spoke on the 26th, actually. He's a State Duma deputy, the head of the budget committee.
Putin committee.
Yes, he stated that the total deficit is approaching 11 trillion rubles. Trillions. 12 zeros, I think. Yes, a billion, a trillion. Yes, that's correct. And what do we have left in the end, so to speak? We have 1 minute left, but if you could sum it up somehow, please do.
Well, to sum it up, all of this still hasn't changed Russia's desire to continue the war and achieve its goals. And I tend to think that this is the kind of situation where, well, the Putin regime has become a hostage to this bicycle-like way of existence. As long as you keep pedaling,
Ride on, stay up.
You maintain your balance. But as soon as you stop pedaling, you fall And the point is that this bicycle is heading straight for an abyss. So it turns out that if you stop pedaling, you fall. If you keep pedaling, eventually you reach the abyss and fall in anyway. And that's why I have I have an answer when people tell me things are getting worse or better. I always answer very simply, right now the situation for Ukraine is better than it was on February 24th, 2022. And Russia hasn't become stronger since then. We have become stronger, but they haven't. And that explains a lot.
Mr. Valentyn, thank you for your assessment.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming today. Valentyn Hladkykh, an expert from the Analytical Center United Ukraine, was our guest in the studio today, and we thank him for that.